the Rotarian advisor to GIIS Interact Club, to address those gathered here today and share with us his insights on mental well-being, as well as advise the members of the Interact Club. Before joining the Rotary Club of Singapore, Rotarian Uttam Kriplani was a member of the Cochin West Rotary Club. He has served on the boards of both the clubs in various capacities and has the distinction of being a 100%er throughout his involvement with the Rotary. We welcome you, sir. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, so now I would like to invite our president, Diya Nair, to address the gathering. Diya, please, thank you.
A very good evening to one and all present here. I'm Diya Nair, and I welcome everyone to the Mental Health Seminar, where specifically our very experienced speaker, Rotarian Uttam, will be covering the need to work towards removing stigma associated with mental illness, recognizing symptoms, especially amongst teenagers, and strategies for good mental health. Mental health and well-being is an important aspect of our health. The more we're aware of our own feelings and behaviors, the more we're able to manage our health as a whole. However, this can be done if we understand what stops us from seeking help. Rotarian Uttam today will definitely give us an insight onto the mental health space in the Singapore context and the importance of managing and coping as teenagers. Do listen to the seminar very carefully, because the Kahoot questions and the most fun and exciting part of this seminar will be from Rotarian Uttam's speaking session. And if you feel the need to take notes, please do so as well. On to you, Mr. Rotarian Uttam.
While you're doing that, can I just start by drawing your attention to this morning's Straits Times, the life section on it. For those who have not seen it, it might be well worthwhile looking at it, because it's got 3 pages on mental illness and mental problems, particularly focused on the teens and some of the difficulties they have. So if you haven't, do look. I just noticed it about an hour ago. Otherwise, I might have scanned it and kept it for you, shown it to you on this. Thank you very much. If I can move on to the second slide, please. Did you know, and it's something very, very frightening as far as I'm concerned, in 2020, there were 452 suicides, of which 30 were in the age group of 10 to 19. And that's the age group we are talking to and about and with today, which is, as I said, very, very frightening. And if we can show the suicide rate as it has spread from 2017 to 2020, is there another slide that covers this? Yeah, that's the one. If you notice, there was a 10% jump in 2016, 2018, and there was only 1% increase between 18 and 19. But in the year 2020, it jumped by 13%. I hate to think what 21 will be like, because with the current COVID situation and related problems, I believe this number is going to jump quite substantially. But one of the things, if I can move on to the next slide, please. As far as I'm concerned, the biggest scourge in our society today associated with mental illness is that one word, stigma. People still refuse to accept that there is a problem, or if there is a problem, they shove it under the carpet or put kids into another room, or teenage or their loved ones whom they should be really looking out for and caring for. I have to tell you this one story about, I went into the house of a person who I knew had a family member who was not 100% normal. And believe it or not, I saw that young person chained to the bed in such a way that he would not come out to the room and face me or anybody else that comes in. Now, that's the kind of stigma that was associated with mental illness. This has changed, and for all its other problems, COVID-19 has thrown open a good many people thinking about the problems of mental illness and how we should look out to help people in this field. There's one more slide there, which, there we are. This shows that the position is improving, has improved, and is being highlighted quite effectively amongst the Singaporeans who for years, as I said earlier, kept this whole mental illness feature out of the public case. All right, let's move on to the next slide. So I'm saying here then that as people who are aware of mental illness have to fight against this stigma which continues to dominate certain sectors of the community. And even today, whilst I just said it has opened out a lot, we still have a situation which the realities show that it is very much present in our society. Now, let's look at some of the realities. First of all, mental illness does not denote moral failing. That used to be an issue previously. Oh, it's a morally wrong situation, and therefore it has to be stigmatized. Now we are saying, no, that's not really a moral failing. Let's do something about it. Next point there is, it is not dangerous if handled properly and promptly. And I'm going to use the word promptly very prominently, because promptly, if you realize that there is a little bit of disturbance in the normal behavior of an individual, we must do something immediately. It is treatable. And the treatment costs, though high, are such that collectively, if controlled by the entire society, we could make this into an insignificant aspect. I'm in the insurance world, and believe it or not, the main group insurance policies which cover hospitalization and medical costs generally specifically exclude mental illness costs. Now, to me, that's a disastrous situation. And over the last few years, I've been fighting on this one. And I'm hoping we have made a slight difference in that the MediShield Life coverage now does include some form of mental illness hospitalization. And I'll take a little credit for that, because as the vice chairman of the action group of mental illness, that was my main focus. And I did get an opportunity to talk to people in the government through the association called Action Group for Mental Illness. And over the years, they have included that in the insurance coverage, but it is a very, very minuscule section of cost coverage. I'm going to continue fighting on this one with every opportunity that is available to me. We have to understand and appreciate that mental illness includes not just our emotional problems or emotional situation, but it's a psychological problem. And social well-being are very much three pillars or three circles of appreciation of what mental health includes. Next slide, please. Okay, mental health is important at every stage of life, from childhood and adolescence through adulthood. Now, we've got our chairman of the YSC from Rotary Club of Singapore, Rotarian Mukund, in the chat group today. But it's, if you see these beautiful pictures from the from early stages till very, very late stages, he's been absolutely a gem putting this slide presentation for me. And before I go any further, I have to acknowledge the excellent job that he has done for this presentation. Thank you, Mukund. During our discussions, let's spend some time on how we can help each other. So let's move on to the next slide. Let's focus on some of the health symptoms which are common characteristics. I saw y'all had sent me a list of the various types of mental illness situations that you people sent out and did a survey for the registration of this. And frankly, I was absolutely delighted and amazed at how well y'all collectively presented the need for us to understand a little bit about mental illness situations. Each type of mental illness causes its own symptoms, but many share common characteristics. For instance, not eating enough or overeating, having insomnia or sleeping too much, distancing yourself from other people and favorite activities, feeling fatigue even with enough sleep. And sometimes you feel a bit of numbness or lacking empathy. You can experience unexplainable body pains and achiness, and generally the feeling of hopelessness, helpless, or feeling totally lost. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Okay, here are some more symptoms that manifest themselves. Smoking, drinking, or using drugs more than ever before. In some cases, even if you've not been doing it, the mental illness situation encourages you to try out something in your totally confused state of mind. So confusion certainly comes into play. Forgetfulness comes into play. Irritability, anger, anxiety, sadness, or frightening feelings. You want to constantly fight or argue with friends and family, and having extreme mood swings that cause relationship problems. One day I'm very friendly with a person, and because of my state of health, I start hating that person. I have constant flashbacks or thoughts that somewhere along the line, I just can't get out of my head. And talking of what's in your head, you sometimes hear voices which you can't stop. And having also thoughts of hurting yourself or other people. And hurting yourself can, of course, lead to death by suicide or other means. And having thoughts of hurting others. I don't know, I'm sure you've followed some of these crazy situations in the US where people have youngsters have just taken a gun and gone into a school or education and just shot people. Now, as far as I'm concerned, they are definitely people who need treatment. And also, we are then often unable to carry out our daily activities. So, so this stress and periods of emotional distress can lead to an episode of systems. That makes it difficult for you to maintain normal behavioral activities. And this can often lead to nervous or mental breakdown. And as we, people who are looking into this, trying to understand this, have to try and prevent this sort of situation arising and trying to help people from getting away from this nervous and mental breakdowns. Okay, since we are talking to youngsters and amongst ourselves, even today's paper, if you go through it, there's one comment made by somebody saying, as far as I'm concerned, it's not the fact that I'm a teenager and this is one of my turbulent years as such, but I have a parent who just turned around and told me, you can't afford to be in a mental situation or in a confused situation because you've got to study for your exams. And to me, that sounds like quite a, should I say, casual attitude by the parent or a totally ununderstanding situation. So we as teenagers, we as people who are involved in this study of mental health, trying to understand the problems, and we therefore need to look at working with our own brethren, brothers, sisters, fellow students, etc. And some of the things that as teenagers we run into is a loss of self-esteem. Suddenly, here was this bright young person who suddenly decides, hey, I'm a nobody. I don't need this to be happening to me. I'd rather go and sleep. And that excessive sleeping or even being awake for long times, long periods, are fairly typical signs of and symptoms in teens. I was very actively involved in, can I go back to that earlier slide, please? Yeah. You lose interest in your activities or your favorite hobbies. And you'll probably notice a sudden decline in the academic performance. I've come across situations where people suddenly lose weight and their whole appetite situation changes. Either they become very heavy eaters or they practically eat nothing. And anger, aggression, and personality changes come into play. And there is always then an anxiety over the future. What will happen to me in the future? Will I succeed? Will I not succeed? Will I do maths as a prominent subject? Will I do economics? So there's that anxiety over the future. There's also, in some cases, stress over finances. I'm not sure how many people in the GIIS have financial problems, but I'm sure that's something spread across the whole academic situation, not just in Singapore, but throughout the world. People take scholarships and loans and often don't know how to repay it. They don't have enough money to pay the fees. Parents don't have. So this is where somewhere along the line, maybe we would come in some way or the other. And of course, the primary problem that they are worried about their work performance or their academic performance. I'm having some problem. Just a moment. Okay. How do we go about changing the strategies for good mental health? So here are some suggestions. You must keep a positive attitude about everything. I don't like to say this too often, but somewhere along the line, I've had 2 cancer attacks. I've had a heart bypass operation, and I've had a bile duct situation blockage recently. And I've spent the last 4 years in several weeks in the hospital. But one of the things I have learned very clearly to make myself look at things in a very positive attitude. And at the age of 78, I can tell you, I feel younger than some of the teenagers I'm addressing today. One of the things you have to do is stay physically active. Again, I'm going to boast a little bit. At the age of 78, I play a fairly main game of golf with a handicap of about 18. So that's something that is personal to me, and I look out. And that's something which I feel all teenagers and all people at all ages should be looking at, staying physically active, even if it's just a question of doing half an hour or 45 minutes or simple exercises. And I find one of the things that has helped many people is the fact that by helping others, you're helping yourself. And trying to get enough sleep. This is a major problem for a lot of people who are in a disturbed state of mind. And do try and get as much sleep as possible. Set yourself, I mean, again, I'm quoting myself, at the age of 78, I don't need 8-9 hours of sleep. I'm very comfortable with 4.5, 5 hours of sleep. But that's the sleep that I get, and I'm quite active in spite of that. Eating a healthy diet. It's great to have a McDonald's hamburger sometime, but do have some vegetables along with that. And over the years, make sure that you have your greens and other features for a healthy diet. If at any stage you are uncomfortable or you see somebody who's probably veering towards a mental health problem, ask your school counselor, ask your friends to help in situations like this. And you've got to encourage people with socializing with whom you enjoy spending time with. And forming and using effective coping skills to deal with your problems. Again, I'm saying all this, it's not an easy situation, but we have to work towards it. All right, my next slide, please. Now, what can we as interactors do? Earlier on, we've been talking of mental health and well-being. As interactors, what can we do? Next slide, please. Okay, this is again a repetition, but let's skip this one. And okay, here I put down 5 or 6 major points, but as interactors, you today are doing something that's following item 1 there. You are aware of the circumstances around you. You realize that there is a situation around you. So you are aware of it, and you as interactors are running this webinar today. I'm sure with some ideas today and some that we will share as we go along, you will be better interactors. Things that we should be doing is looking out for changes in the behavioral patterns of our fellow students and peers. Of course, we've talked in terms of eating patterns, inability to concentrate, isolation from friends and family, and feeling bored and irritated. Now, these are the sort of patterns we need to look out for. And just like physical illness, persons who are having difficulties require advice, counseling, and access to the right professional. We, as observers of situation around us, must learn to observe, see what's going around, listen, and listen to the voices around you and try to understand the situation. But one very strong piece of advice: you are not psychologists, psychiatrists, or for that matter, counselors. You will need to be part of the liaison pattern to bring those who need our help in simple ways. And if those don't work, then we look at situations of maybe talk to your school counselor, talk to, and through them to advise their parents, etc., on how we can do something. Okay, the next time, how else can we help? And start by teaching fellow students the importance of promoting the care of, promoting the culture of care, which as interactors, you've already started doing. And that's something we need to do ourselves and promote caring facilities and the culture, being alert to changes in behaviors. Item 3 there is recognizing common signs of distress. If you see that and you think you can help, help. Being ready to lend a listening ear. You'll be surprised how just listening to somebody just wanting to talk and explain or understand something, just talking to somebody and you listening to them helps the situation. You're offering at that stage a little bit of empathy, or a lot of empathy. You've got to be able to find out whether your peers and your friends around you are in any way being left on their own and feeling lonely. You'd be surprised how loneliness can make such a big difference to the well-being and mental health situation. Befriend those who might need and appreciate your help. Remember, it is easier to talk to peers than to teachers and parents. I'm not talking in terms of counselors and psychiatrists, which will become a much later position. Hopefully not, if you all have intervened in the very simple, basic format. The main thing is you must make yourself available for those in need. Remember, it's a small little gesture, but just the fact that you are able to tell them that I'm around, I'm your friend, I am somebody you can turn to and talk. Okay, let's move on. How else can we help? And this is a controversial topic because I'm sure you teenagers and me and others, we're all involved. We are hiding behind Facebook, SMS, emails, and other such impersonal community channels or communicating channels. I must share one little cartoon I saw where there's this scarecrow sitting on a stick in the middle of a field, and birds who normally would go feeding on the plants The mother bird and the parent bird is sort of turning around and saying, hey, you can go ahead, do nothing. But there's a man over there. Said, look, that man doesn't have a phone in his hand, so he is definitely a scarecrow and not a human being. This, to me, emphasizes such a big effect of what Facebooks and emails are doing. As far as I'm concerned, a friendly smile, a pat on the back, collective laughing over a cup of tea has a much, much greater impact than the emojis that we play around with these days. Okay, next point. We've talked about helping each other, but we can get help from various types of organizations, and I've listed some of these here: the Association for Mental Health, Silver Ribbon, Samaritans, Children's Society, and Institute of Mental Health. And there are a whole lot of others who are more than happy to come out, talk to you all, explain things, or even invite you over to their premises when COVID permits. But I think even if you link up with them on the Zoom, etc., it's well worthwhile listening. The Children's Society CEO was at one of our Rotary meetings about 2-3 weeks ago, and we found it's so useful that I think maybe what I'll do is send you a copy of the slides that were presented to us, and it may be worthwhile looking at and following some of them, and then coordinating with the Children's Society. Institute of Mental Health, of course, is available there for you to use. What other organizations can be used for help? Rotary Club of Singapore has worked closely with most of those organizations that we mentioned, and I'm sure you will be more than happy to act as liaison between them and you. And one other thought, I believe you have a great drama and theater group in the school. Why don't you work with them and create a skit highlighting some of the points that we've discussed today and getting the help of those other organizations? Okay, I've got nothing more to say at this stage. I'm going to leave the floor to you, to the organizers on this Kahoot session that they're planning, but I'm quite happy to answer a few questions if you have any to ask at this stage. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm sure like everyone has something to really take away from that. I think mental health is such a pertinent topic, and I'm so glad you came here today and addressed all of us. So thank you. But yeah, as you said, moving on, we will be moving into a Q&A session. So all participants, if you guys could send in your questions on the chat, I will relay it to Mr. Uttam Kriplani. And yeah, I'll give you guys a few minutes to sort of adjust that. Thank you. So we'll get started. So our first question for today is, what do you think is a suitable response to someone who has a mental breakdown in front of you?
What is the suitable response?
Yeah.
I think the first action that I would take if I was in your school is talk to the counselor. I believe you have a counselor in school. Don't try and solve that breakdown problem yourself. You have recognized it, you understood that that's a problem, and that's all we as youngsters should be doing at this stage. Refer the person to the counselor and let the counselor take it from there. You've done the first job, recognizing that there is a problem. And that's the sort of situation I think we should work towards.
All right, thank you so much, sir. Moving on to our next question. It's what would you recommend to overcome procrastination?
Sorry, what was that? What do I recommend for?
To overcome procrastination.
Get on with it. It's a very, very difficult situation. Are you suggesting that procrastination is perhaps a symptom of mental illness? Because it's not always. I have been known to procrastinate quite regularly. And somewhere along the line, I think I get to a stage where it has to be done, and therefore I do it. But over the weeks, days, months, I might procrastinate. Let's put it this way. Even this talk today, y'all gave me lots of notice time on it, but the real effective work that I did was after a lot of procrastination, and probably the last 7-8 days that I got down and got the slides organized, for instance. Though some of the aspects, of course, we've been discussing this in various formats in different societies and associations that I'm involved with. But I don't think procrastination is any kind of mental or health problem. It's more a question of understanding or not understanding the need to get on with it. And one of my favorite comments is, get on with it.
Yeah, I mean, after all the procrastination, I mean, I think we can all agree that you did a fantastic job with all the slides and the talk.
Thank you very much. But on that note, all those lovely, colorful pictures and all that was done by Mukund, chairman of YSC. He's a great expert, and I procrastinated after quite some time and said, hey, Mukund, help me. So that's what you see today. I wrote it, but his handiwork is making it very attractive.
So thank you, Mr. Rotarian Mukundan.
You need to thank Mukund for that.
Okay, so moving on to our next question, which I think...
No, I'll come to that, Netra, right? There are two main reasons for procrastination and two common explanations. What I can remember from my blog, what I wrote somewhere in 2006 or 7, right? One is fear of failure, right? If I'm not wrong, and dread of taking on long time, right? And how do we control that from each one's behavior? It's the close friends who are together, they can help them out. That is the main thing, what they need to do on it.
And that's where interactors can come in.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yeah, so moving on to our next question, which I personally think is a very pertinent question in today's day and age. It's we all face stress and anxiety in our day-to-day life. So how do we differentiate between the regular stress and a mental health issue?
Tough one. The mental health situations, if it's exaggerated in any way, then it's obviously something that needs counseling, needs some kind of professional help. It's a tough one. It's something which you will have to sort out yourself on this. But I can understand the anxiety and the other issues that arise from the points that you have raised. At the end of the day, if you can't solve your own problems or with the help of those around you, then you've got to go out and talk to somebody who's outside your sphere of influence, because sometimes you don't want to talk to your peers and you don't want to talk to a counselor, or you don't want to talk to your parents. And I will recommend that you do read today's live section in the Straits Times. There are 3 pages of comments by various people on mental illness and the difficulties that they are facing. It's well worth. I wish I had seen that article before I wrote all these points for discussion today, but well worthwhile reading. You can only do this much. And beyond that, it has to go into the hands of the professionals.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, I feel like, with the whole world today where we're spreading so much awareness about mental health and whatnot, you tend to internalize that to a large extent, and you tend to be like, oh, do I have something like that? So yeah, I think it's great to sort of approach people about it and talk about it. Yeah, so our last question for today is, how do you think one should tell a trusted person if they're experiencing symptoms of chronic stress, and if they're worried about what their loved ones will think?
Again, a tough one, but I think talking to loved ones immediately, peers, etc., is something that is much easier to do than to go to parents. There are a lot of parents who don't want to know. As I mentioned earlier on, there was this parent who turned around and said, I have no time to listen to all this. You should be preparing for your exams. Not realizing it's the pressure of the exams that is causing the various other situations that are developing in such a person. But yes, I think we have to watch each case. We've got to analyze this, not just individually, personally, but if you've got a group and you feel there's somebody outside the group who needs the help, try and bring him in or bring her into the situation. Talk to them, listen to their problem. It's going to be tough because the fact that they are in a situation where they are not communicating or not suddenly realizing that they've shrunk into themselves is going to be a tough one. But all we can do is make an effort to open up your hearts to them, or open up your listening methods to them, showing them empathy, and various other features that we've talked about today. It's this whole concept of mental illness and mental well-being is, in my view, a very, very tough situation. It's tough to handle. It's tough to communicate. But that's why I said, let's catch it promptly and as early as possible. If you go into something like the Institute of Mental Health at the moment, you still find people locked up in individual rooms because they have become violent and they are in a position where they hurt others. So they've got to be separated. But then those are the extreme cases. There are cases where they've got to be injected and subjected to total bed rest and knocked out, if you like. Our role is never going to be at that kind of decision-making situation. Our role has to be at an initial situation where we spot or look out for situations where we feel that there is something amiss, and then you start saying, is there something I can do? And then try and do it. If it gets to a stage where it's beyond a collective or individual acceptance of the situation, then of course you have to bring in the counselors and others.
Thank you so much.
Hope that helped.
Yeah, definitely. And as you rightly said, I think we under the umbrella of mental health, we all have a role to play. Like, it might not be you, but it might be someone who's close to you. And I think the pointers that you mentioned during your presentation as well were very helpful. So thank you. But yes, that is it for today's Q&A session. So thank you to everyone who sent in their questions, and to you, sir, for answering each one so patiently and diligently.
Thank you.
Yeah, as the event draws to a close, I would like to extend my fervent thanks to Rotarian Uttam Kriplani for taking time off his busy schedule and being here with us today. Thank you, sir. I would also like to thank Rotarian Mukundan as well as Mr. Ashwin Geete in their everlasting support for all our initiatives. Lastly, I would like to thank all of you for being such a wonderful audience and in contributing to make this event an imminent success. As a last announcement, kindly fill in the feedback form that is going to be sent on the chat. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.